Monique, are you there? Monique? Okay, let's see who's missing. Letitia is missing and Javon. Okay, so we have a quorum. I guess the others will join us hopefully very soon. Let me do my register as usual. Brian, is that you? Brian, can you hear me? Austin. Indira, yes, it's there. Are you still there, Indira?
I'm here.
Great, great. Think you have a good connection. Shaniqua?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Hi, Shaniqua, how are you?
Pretty good.
Okay, I'll go with pretty good. I'll take pretty good. Monique, can you hear me? Yeah, Monique is out there somewhere in the wild. Ah, oh yes, she's there. All right. Brian just got disconnected. I'm giving him a minute. Hopefully one or two other persons will check in. Otherwise, we will begin one way or the other. Those of you who are in the room, has everybody submitted a makeup exam who wanted to submit one?
I did.
Yeah.
I did as well.
Excellent, excellent. What about you, Monique? Any makeup? Did you submit a makeup, Monique? Did you submit a makeup, Monique? Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great, great. I see we lost you the first time.
Yeah, bad connection.
Yeah, so I see. Shaniqua looks like she had a similar problem. There she is back. Okay, maybe the weather. Okay, Brian, so you're here. Good. Did you submit your makeup, Brian?
Yeah, I did.
Great. Monique, did you hear my question? Did you submit a makeup? Monique is out in the jungle somewhere. Ah, yes, she did. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
she I don't know if you checked the chat, but she said it's loud there, but she just said yes, she did.
Okay, excellent. So she's multitasking today.
Yes, she's on multitask.
Uh, I guess she must have somebody out there who's getting ready to do something great. Okay, so let us begin then. Of course, today is our final class session. Next week, you have your your final exam.
What? Really?
Indira, you could not be shocked.
I don't know. I know, but I just didn't
Oh,
know.
you just like already, yeah. Time passes quickly. I tell students that all the time. Some of them don't believe it. Okay, it does. This is our final session. We have final exams next week. And of course, final exams will be based on, does anybody remember the topics?
The last 3 topics, 4 topics we allow.
The last four, which were they? What were they?
Verification, valuation, vouching, and I don't know the
Internal
one.
controls.
Internal controls, not
Oh,
vouching.
yes, internal controls. Yes.
Internal controls. Yep, vouching, sorry, is one.
Vouching,
Verification, which we did last week.
right?
And then whatever we do today, which will be what? Anybody remembers? What would be
Professional ethics
professional ethics or ethics and auditing? Okay,
in auditing.
way to go. So those are the topics you're going to be responsible for next week. There will be no short answer questions. Sorry, no definitions. All your questions will be short answer questions. There'll probably be between 10 and 12 questions. Okay?
What?
Yeah. So that hopefully will make your life easier. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, nothing's going to make it easier until I'm done. All right.
Exactly.
That's your schedule for next week. Please make sure, I hope you've been reviewing every week since we started the new sector for the second half.
Woo.
This week will just be a final review for all that work you've been doing for the last couple of weeks. That is my hope. I know students like to procrastinate for some strange reason. How are the case studies going?
Just going.
Okay. You still have until when?
Good.
What is the deadline for your case study?
Next week, eh?
Yeah, next week when?
The last class.
The last
the
class.
Yes.
If again, if you're done before Monday of next week, you can submit your case study. All right, feel free to do that. That might be preferable than waiting until the 9th hour on Monday itself and the lights go off and you can't send it and then you're stuck. Or some crazy thing. All right. Any questions before we get into our final lecture for today? Any other questions that I may not have covered?
So the same thing for the final exam what we did for midterm. We had to come in to this classroom.
Yes. For those of you in New Providence, you have to report to the classroom. And persons who are not in New Providence will be in the classroom virtually. Same as last time. Okay, good question. Remember, come in around 15 minutes before exam time, so you do not have to stress. Always a good idea. All right, good question. Any other questions?
I'm thinking a question regarding the case study. You
Yeah.
mentioned that we can include details from our notes.
Yes.
Okay, and is that also relating to the summary, the very first question? Or we're talking about like supporting answers in the questions that follow? Or use your discretion?
Okay. Nico, you were saying?
Yes, there was a break there. I was asking with regards to the case study, supporting documents or information, sorry, should be included throughout the case study, including your notes?
When you say supporting documents, you're referring
No.
to,
Outside, sorry. Talking about
Yeah.
if you find some information on Google.
oh, you mean making references?
Yes.
Yeah, if you use lecture notes, you just refer to course lecture notes as your reference.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
We're able to do our, we're able to do like more research in depth if we choose to, right?
Absolutely. You can do as much research as you want from any sources. It doesn't have to all come from your lecture notes.
Okay.
Yeah, preferably some outside sources as well. Like somebody said earlier, Google. But again, Google is just another source. You can use any number of sources that you want. Okay, to build your to respond to your case, not a problem. All right. If you think of any other questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt me at any time and raise them. So if you pull up your notes on professional ethics in auditing, that is what we will be discussing as our final topic tonight. And you'll see straight away from that material that the reference to professional ethics has to do with certain accepted standards of personal and business conduct and behavior. Now, professional ethics in auditing refers in our case to auditing, but professional ethics refers to good behavior in any profession, and the word ethics itself refers to good behavior in any individual. So you can see this thing can be extended from the baseline ethics, which is good behavior by anyone, to professional ethics, which is good behavior by professionals of any kind. And then in our case, to professional ethics in auditing, which is that accepted standard of professional good behavior that we expect to come from our auditing. Part of the reason for professional ethics in auditing, because unlike other people in the world, auditors are not perfect. Some of them do things wrong on purpose. Some of them do some things that are outside of their professional guidelines, and many of them have paid the price in terms of fines and in some cases losing their licenses as accountants. So this business of good professional behavior, good values, using proper guiding principles is very important in the audit profession. And the reason for that, obviously, is whatever the auditors decide at the end of the day, as far as review of financial statements are concerned, we are expected to, we all believe them. Just like when our doctors tell us that we have a problem, we believe the doctor because they're supposed to be qualified to do that job. Same with lawyers, engineers, or any other professions, including our plumbers. We sometimes do not give credit to our plumbers, but just think for a moment, what would happen to the world if our plumbers were not good at their jobs? And worse, if they were unethical in their work. Okay? So this whole thing applies across the board. We are limiting it to auditing because that is what we're doing. By the way, while I remember, I know that I don't know if it'll be next semester or the semester following, but I know that BIFS is thinking about running an audit 2 class. For those of you who are successful in audit 1, I would like to think that would be everybody. Failure is not an option in my perspective. So I suspect when that happens, look out for part 2. If you see it being offered, please go ahead and do it. There's always a whole bunch of important and useful information to be had. Remember, you don't have to be an auditor to benefit from auditing concepts. And some of you do not know if you'll ever end up in audit. You might end up in your internal audit departments. And even if you don't, whatever your capacity is and whatever jobs you're in, the work of the auditor will always be critical. And so it's information that never, ever goes away. All right. So this behavior that we expect from our professional auditors is acknowledged worldwide. Auditors have a very specialized knowledge and skill, and so we hold them to a higher standard than persons who are not auditors in terms of the job that they do. And at the end of the day, when they give their audit opinions, we are of the belief, and we have to be, that they have governed themselves accordingly, that they have done the moral and correct thing as far as their jobs are concerned, and that whatever they say at the end of the day, we can believe them. Okay? These guys and girls make professional judgments all the time using their skill and experience. And so the general public respects that generally. And whatever they say, we believe generally what they have to say, which is why sometimes when auditors go off the track, we are very, very disappointed and surprised when that happens, because under the professional code of conduct and the ethical requirements, that we do not expect that behavior from any person, professional, and in our case, professional auditors. Okay? Very important, this question of ethics. Now, companies rely heavily on what auditors have to say. Banks rely heavily on what auditors have to say. Shareholders rely heavily on what auditors have to say. Employees rely on what auditors have to say. Government rely heavily on what auditors have to say. We are all relying on what auditors have to say. And we should know by now, as a result of doing this class, that we expect auditors to come up with anybody remembers the phrase? What do we expect auditors to come up with? A what? When they do their auditing. Anybody remembers the phrase?
Is it a true and fair
Yes.
view?
Thank you very much. With a true and fair view. Okay? And when they come up with a true and fair view, all of those stakeholders that I mentioned earlier, we're all hoping that they're doing their jobs right and they are conducting their affairs as professional auditors should. Of course, you can see what the fallout would be if they are not doing their jobs ethically. Okay? And so whether you're an external auditor, an internal auditor, whether you're a financial expert, a tax expert, a management accountant, whatever the case might be, there is this expectation. And again, like I said, even in any other profession, as bankers, or even if you're a bartender, you expected to behave ethically by charging the right price for drinks, that giving drinks in the proper quantities that you're supposed to, and so on. These are all normal ethical acts. So you don't have to be a big time professional. Well, let's say if you're a bartender and you're good at it, then you're generally considered to be a what? Professional bartender. So it keeps coming up across the board, no matter basically what capacity. This expectation of good ethics is considered to apply. Okay? If your parents are expected to exhibit behavior that children can emulate and be proud of, children see you doing too many unethical things and they learn what you do. Then they start practicing what you do. And then they grow up doing what you do. So you see, it's a big old issue. Doesn't only apply to what we're talking about in professional auditing. And so auditors are expected to perform their duties at the highest possible levels, using all the ethical tools at their disposal to make sure that they maintain the reputation of the auditing and accounting profession, and certainly the trust of society as a whole, no matter what category or stakeholders might be involved. Okay? We can see right away any wrongdoing by auditors can create all kinds of problems for all kinds of people who rely on their work. So basically, an auditor's self-interest is supposed to be secondary. When they go in to do a job, they're supposed to be objective. If you don't like the CEO, that should not affect your audit. If one of the girls who work for the company left you after a long relationship, that shouldn't affect the audit. And if you think it would, you should leave that particular auditing for that firm and have your bosses send you somewhere else. The point is, your personal life and agenda should not be involved. For the professional auditor, you're expected to be strictly objective. Okay? And so all of the auditing bodies, the ICPA, IFAC, International Federation of Accountants, Institute of Accounting, Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, all the professional bodies, they all have their codes of ethics, which are designed to help accountants and auditors do their jobs better. Okay? And for those professionals, auditors and accountants who may have any doubt, there are some written ethical guidelines that they are, in fact, tested on even before they become licensed to become auditors and accountants, to make sure that they have no excuse about the ethical guidelines that they should be following. Good ethics establishes good credibility. Professionalism establishes credibility, and good ethics establishes confidence in the information that is being reviewed. Very important. Any sign from the auditors that they cannot be trusted is never a good idea, and it puts things into a major tailspin. Okay? Auditors must act in the interest of the public, the shareholders, the staffers, government, everybody is relying on that information. I cannot overemphasize it. It's a problem that we keep battling with every day, because every now and then we have some auditors who do not act ethically, even though they're not large numbers. But any one of them that do not do their jobs well, it shines a negative light on all the others who are. So the auditor then, from a professional ethics standpoint, must have regard to what we call the legitimate interests of their clients who rely on them. Obviously, the clients hire them and pay them, sometimes even millions of dollars, depending on the size of the firm. The government, who's relying on information so that they can collect the correct amount of taxes and even help them with legislation. Financial institutions who have loaned companies money, they expect the auditors to be truthful and honest and ethical in their review, and let the financial institutions who sometimes have loans in the millions and billions of dollars with companies, let them know what's really going on, so that if they have to take steps to protect their loans, they can do that. And of course, the employees are concerned because they work there. They want to know whether they should stay or leave, whether the company is sound or not. All right. Investors who put their money, their shareholders, into the company, they need to know what's going on and they need the correct information. They don't need stuff that's made up by senior management from time to time. They need the truth. Okay? And of course, let's not forget all of us, which we call the business community. We rely on it too, because we buy goods and services from firms. If firms are not acting ethically, then they run into trouble. And some of them may eventually have to close down, and then we have to find new suppliers for whatever we buy. People are unemployed and society is impacted. Everybody is affected when things are not done properly. Okay? And this is why we take a little bit of time at the end of the session to talk about ethics. Okay? As you can see, the range of the work of the auditor is far-fetching, very, very confidential and sensitive information they manage, so they have to be able to shut their mouths. They cannot be talking about people's personal and business affairs once they leave a particular firm, just like bankers have a duty of confidentiality. All these things are absolutely critical. And let's not forget, as we'll see as we go through, that auditors have to be independent. In other words, whatever is going on personally, they have to put it aside and just go in and do not allow anything, any relationships, personal, family, no kind of relationships to impact the work that they're doing in a particular firm when they are conducting audits. And so here lies the importance for the discussion on professional ethics and auditing. And so now we'll take a look to see what our final notes have to say about professional ethics in auditing. All right. So, having said all of that, blah, 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 let's see. I can take a moment and breathe. All right, look at your notes on page 2 under the heading Code of Professional Conduct, Professional Ethics. Let me know when you find it. Code of Professional Ethics, the middle of page 2. You guys see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great, great.
Yeah, see it.
So Brian, since you're the only room at the moment, why don't you get started for us today? I'm always picking on the girls. All right, codes of professional ethics. Let it rip.
Okay, I apologize for the little noise in the background.
Okay,
Oh, hold on. Code of Professional Ethics. Here we will describe the two well-known codes of professional ethics. IFAC Code of Ethics for professional accountants and the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct. IFAC Code of Ethics for professional accountants. As distinguishing mark of the accountancy profession, it is acceptance of the responsibility to act in the public interest. In acting in the public interest, a professional accountant should observe and comply with the ethical requirements of this code. A professional accountant is required to comply with the following fundamental principles. One, integrity. Two, objectivity. Three, professional competence and due care. Four, confidentiality. Five, professional behavior. Integrity. A professional accountant should be straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships.
pick a pen, Brian, for 1 second. If you don't remember anything else from this particular module, remember integrity, because see, integrity does not only apply to the professional auditor. We are applying it to the professional auditor because we're discussing auditing, but this applies to all of us who hold or have responsibility for anything. And notice the two key words. The definition of integrity has to do with being straightforward and anyone? What's the other word?
Honest.
Yes. Okay. So whatever you're doing, if somebody comes to you one day in the future and say, you know what, you lack integrity, please don't say, well, thank you very much for that compliment. Okay. That is not a compliment. However, if somebody comes to you and say, you are a man or woman of integrity, then you should smile and say, thank you for the compliment. Okay. All right. Keep going.
Two, objectivity. A professional accountant should not allow bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence of others to override professional or business judgment. Three, professional competence and due care. Sorry. A professional accountant has a continuing duty to maintain professional knowledge and skill at the level required to ensure that a client or employer receives competent professional service based on current development in practice, legislation, and techniques. Professional accountants should act diligently and by applicable techniques, technical and professional standards when providing professional services. Confidentiality. A professional accountant should respect the confidentiality of information acquired as a result of professional and business relationships and should not disclose any such information to third parties without proper and specific authority unless there is a legal or professional right or duty to disclose. You can hear me, right?
Keep going, yes.
It just making sure because I hearing some background noise just now. Okay, sorry. Confidential information acquired as a result of professional and business relationships should not be used for the personal advantage of the professional accountant or third parties. Professional behavior. A professional accountant should comply with relevant laws and regulations and should avoid any action that discredits the profession.
Before Brian goes on, as you can see, a lot of this stuff is very important just for you guys and whatever professional life you're in today and whatever you might become tomorrow. All right. So yeah, we're talking about the professional accountant slash auditor for the purposes of this course. But make no mistake, don't presume that these ethical requirements, to some extent, especially with regards to confidentiality, professional conduct, objectivity, and integrity, do not presume that they don't apply to you guys. They do. Because remember, these are things that we have to all take into consideration in whatever work we do. And even sometimes, even the work of running our day-to-day lives, our households, whatever the case might be, our churches, whatever, these things still apply. That's the whole point. It's not like when you're done with this class, you can say, well, I can be the devil in hell because that only applies to auditors and accountants. No, it does not. It applies to most of us, if not all of us. All right, keep going, Brian.
IFAC Code of Ethics. Threats to objectivity and independence. The IFAC Code of Ethics works on the basis that an assurance firm the IFAC Code of Ethics works on the basis that an assurance firm's integrity, objectivity, and independence are subject to various threats that the firm must have safeguards in place to counter these threats. The threats are as follows. Number one, self-interest threat. Two, the self-review threat. Three, the advocacy threat. Four, the familiarity or trust threat. Five, the intimidation threat. The self-interest threat. Self-interest threat occurs when a firm, network firm, or a member of the assurance team could benefit from a financial interest in or other self-interest conflicts with an assurance client. The self-review threat. Self-review threat which occurs when any product or judgment of a previous assurance agreement or non-assurance agreement needs to be reevaluated in reaching conclusions on the assurance agreement. Or two, a member of the assurance team was previously a director or officer of the assurance client. I was an employee in a position to exert direct and significant influence over the subject matter of the assurance engagement.
In other words, before Brian goes on, we're saying here the assurance is given by the auditors. The assurance client would be any firm that the auditor is auditing. And here we're saying if individual, for example, was previously employed or a director connected to the company that is being audited, then that could be a threat to objectivity and integrity, etc., and confidentiality. So far, we're just looking at those things out there that could impact those uh, ethical requirements that he looked at earlier. And it is suggesting that we all, wherever we have ethical responsibility, need to be aware of these threats that can interfere with integrity and confidentiality and objectivity. That's really what we're talking about here. Keep going, Brian.
The advocacy threat. Advocacy threat, which occurs when a firm, a member of the assurance team, or a member of the network firm, as applicable, promote or may be perceived to promote an assurance client's position or opinion to the point that objectivity may or may be perceived to be compromised. Such may be the case if a firm or a member of the assurance team were to subordinate their judgment to that of the client. The familiarity or trust threat. Familiarity threats, which occurs when, by a close relationship with an assurance client, its directors, officers, or employees, a firm or a member of the assurance team or network firm, as applicable, becomes too sympathetic to the client's interests. The intimidation threat. Intimidation threat occurs when a member of the assurance team may be deterred from acting objectively and exercising professional skepticism by threats, whether actual or perceived, from the directors, officers, or employees of an assurance client. Safeguards. It is the responsibility of the auditor to ensure that they remain independent of the client entity. In situations where no effective safeguards are available to reduce the threats to an acceptable level, the only possible actions are to eliminate their activities or interests creating the threats, or to refuse to accept or to continue the assurance engagement. In assessing threats to independence and the possible safeguards to mitigate or eliminate these threats, auditors are required at all times to consider what is the public interest. It is also important to note that the adoption of certain safeguards may not address independence in appearance.
Thank you very much, Brian, for piling up those codes of ethics as required by the IFAC. By the way, did anybody get curious during the reading about what IFAC meant and said, let me look up that IFAC in Google and see what that is? What does that mean? Anybody? Satisfy your curiosity.
International Federation of
Federation.
Accountants.
Absolutely. Okay. One of the many, not many, but one of the accounting firms internationally that review accounting and auditing practices in and around the world. Okay. So what he's been talking about are those ethical requirements, ethical and threats to ethical behavior as put forth by the International Federation of Accountants. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Shaniko, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now you can pick up where he left off. This time, though, we're looking at the ICAEW code because maybe you guys will see some similarity and some differences as we go. But again, we do have several international accounting bodies around the world, depending on which country you're dealing with. And they all have their versions of ethical behavior. Some of them very similar, and some have a few differences involved, but not too many. All right, ICAEW, what do they say about the code of ethics?
ICAEW code. ICAEW's code of ethics, the code applies to all members, students, affiliates, employees of member firms, and where applicable, member firms in all of their professional and business activities, whether remunerated or voluntary. This is influenced by the guidance of IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, of which ICAEW is a member. The ICAEW code states that professional accountants are expected to follow the guidance contained in the fundamental principles in all of their professional and business activities, whether carried out with or without reward, and in other circumstances where to fail to do so would bring discredit to the profession. Code has been derived from the International Ethics Standards Board of Accountancies, IESBA, Code of Ethics issued on July 2009 by the International Federation of Accountants. Accordingly, compliance with the remainder of this code will ensure compliance with the principles of the IESBA code. Paragraph numbering in the rest of this code replicates that used in the IESBA Code of Ethics, except in respect of sections 221, 241, and Part D, which have no direct equivalent in the IESBA Code of Ethics. ICAEW's Code of Ethics, in place to 31st of December 2010, replaced ICAEW's Guide to Professional Ethics on 1st of September 2006. A revised Code of Ethics applies from 1st of January 2011. The substance of this code is the same as our previous Guide to Professional Ethics, but the layout and structure of the new code are more user-friendly. The ICAEW code implements the IFAC code above so that following it ensures compliance with the IFAC code.
Before you go on, Shaniqua, while I remember, that little bit in there about what code replaced the other code and what year they replaced the other year. Let me just put you on notice. I'm not going to expect you to try to memorize that. The only thing I want you to know from those few little paragraphs right there is that these codes were established by the ICAEW under the IFAC. And of course, these codes are designed to do the very same thing we saw when Brian was reading, and we'll see in a few moments when you pick it up. So if you're not remembering all the section, subsection code number 2112, please don't worry about it. That's just professional gobbledygook for those persons who are involved in that from federation and association perspectives. We are not going to lose sleep on the things that they get bogged down with in terms of what section. We are interested in the core issues, and that happens to be the listing of the codes of conduct that each group of accountants and auditors, whether it's the IFAC or ICAEW, are expected to adhere to in their day-to-day work. Okay? All right, keep going.
The 5 fundamental principles of ICAEW code. Integrity. A professional accountant should be straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships.
Sounds familiar?
Yes, it does.
Okay, remember the ICAEW is a member of what? IFAC. So pretty much, depending on what country they're in, they are not changing the IFAC code that much in some cases, and we'll see whether or not they make any adjustments on their own. So far, the ICAEW's code seems to be similar, if not exactly the same, as its member federation, the IFAC. Anybody look up ICAEW? Out of curiosity?
No, I didn't.
Okay, can somebody, before we go on, so that we can see the connection, ICAEW, what does that mean?
Institute of Chartered Accounts in England of Wales.
Yeah, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. So this particular body is out of the UK and Wales, okay? and they are a member of the International Association of Accountants from around the world. And so you can see why they're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel, because the ICAEW is the UK version of accountants, and they have membership like so many other memberships that we'll see in a moment. Okay, keep going, Tanika.
Okay. Number 2, objectivity. A professional accountant should not allow bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence of others to override professional or business judgments. 3,
In other words, if Shanika is an auditor and she goes into a company to audit, she finds out that her cousin or her sister or auntie's sister's child committed fraud. Under objectivity, what is Shaniqua expected to do? Anyone, including Shaniqua?
should not allow bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence of others to override professional or business judgments.
Correct. Don't let your relationship cause you to act like you didn't see it, to pretend to see it, and for you to fail to report it because that's your sister, auntie, cousin, sister, whatever the relationship is. That's how serious this is. Okay? If you are auditing and you discover it and they committed the fraud or the misstatement or whatever, you have a duty. Your responsibility to your profession is greater than your responsibility to your relationships. The things we learn in auditing. Spooky. All right, keep going.
Okay. Number 3, professional competence and due care. A professional accountant has a continuing duty to maintain professional knowledge and skill at the level required to ensure that a client or employer receives competent professional services based on current developments in practice, legislation, and techniques. Professional accountants should act diligently and by applicable technical and professional standards. 4, confidentiality. A professional accountant should respect the confidentiality of information acquired as a result of professional and business relationships and should not disclose any such information to third parties without proper and specific authority unless there is a legal or professional right or duty to disclose. Confidential information acquired as a result of professional and business relationships should not be used for the personal advantage of the professional accountant or third parties. 5, professional behavior. A professional accountant should comply with relevant laws and regulations and should avoid any action that discredits the profession.
So you can see so far, based on what she has said, that the ICAW's code of conduct is very similar to its international associate company institute, and they're associated with the IFAC. And so now we are going to see another board or association who has its set of ethical standards to see how the APB connects, if any, with the codes of conduct as put forth by the IFAC and AEW. So before she goes on, let us find out what the APB is. Anyone? The APB.
Auditing Practices Board.
Say it again.
Auditing Practices Board in the UK.
Yeah, the Auditing Practices Board, right?
Mhm.
So now we have a third group putting their perspective on the ethical standards that are required from accountants and auditors. So you can see practicing accountants around the world, if they're properly trained and experienced, they should have no excuse about their ethical requirements. It is all over the place. I mean, for the last hour or so, we've been totally smeared with ethical standards from all these different accounting and auditing bodies. Okay? No excuse whatsoever, and there's a reason for that. All right, keep going, Shaniqua.
APB ethical standards. UK auditors are also subject to APB's ethical standards. The APB is the Auditing Practices Board in the UK, which also issues auditing standards adopted from IFAC, which creates them.
And IFAC again means what?
I forgot that one.
It's okay if anybody else remembers.
The IFAC.
Huh?
Would you say the IFAC?
Yeah, what does that mean again?
International Oh, Jesus. International Federation of Accounts.
Yes, indeed. All right, keep going. Shaniqua.
Okay, where was I?
APB.
Okay, APB has issued ethical standards with which UK auditors must comply when carrying out UK audits. They are as follows. ES1, integrity, objectivity, and independence. ES2, financial, business, employment, and personal relationships. ES3, long association with the audit engagement. ES4, fees, remuneration, and evaluation policies, litigation, gifts, and hospitality. ES5, non-audit services provided to audit clients. There's also an ES with provisions available for smaller entities, which is not examinable. This offers exemptions and special rules to the auditors of smaller entities. These standards were developed about the IFAC Code of Ethics and also the EC recommendation on the independence of statutory audits. AICPA Code of Professional Conduct.
What does AICPA mean, anybody?
American Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
Absolutely. So far, we've seen the IFAC, which is the international body. And then we've seen some individual country bodies like the ICAEW, the AICPA, which we'll talk about next. And what's the other one we saw? Anyone?
So the one in the UK,
Yeah, which one is that?
Yes.
ethical standards. APB, Auditing Practices Board.
Yeah, yeah, APB, yes, absolutely. So come next week when I ask you to list a couple of objectives or threats or whatever. You never know. I don't want you to lose sleep over what these acronyms mean, but I might say, for example, what does AICPA and IFAC mean? Just to see if you bother to take a look at them again, just in case when you're reading an article or having a discussion or somewhere hanging out and it comes up that your ear will go like, wait a minute, I heard that somewhere before. And then you'd be curious to see what they have to say. Okay, Shaniqua, keep going.
The Code of Professional Conduct of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants consists of two sections. The principles, number one, and number two, the rules. The principles provide the framework for the rules, which govern the performance of professional services by members. The Council of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants is authorized to designate bodies to promulgate technical standards under the rules, and the bylaws require adherence to those rules and standards. A few definitions taken from the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct must be understood to minimize misinterpretation of the rules. Client, any person or entity other than the member's employer that engages a member or member's firm to perform professional services, or a person or entity concerning which professional services are performed. Firm, a form of the organization permitted by law or regulation, whose characteristics conform to resolutions of the Council of the IACPA and that is engaged in public practice. Institute, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Member, a member, associate member, international associate of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Public practice. The public practice consists of the performance of professional services for a client by a member or a member's firm. Number one, the principles. The principles of the Code of Professional Conduct of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants express the profession's recognition of its responsibilities to the public, to clients, and colleagues. They are as follows. AICPA Code of Professional Conduct, the principles. Number one, responsibilities. Number two, the public interest. Number three, integrity. Number four, objectivity and independence. Number five, due care. Number six, scope and nature of services. A, responsibilities. In carrying out their responsibilities as professionals, members should exercise sensitive professional and moral judgments in all their activities. B, the public interest. Members should accept the obligation to act in a way that will serve the public interest, honor the public interest, and demonstrate a commitment to professionalism. C, integrity. To maintain and broaden public confidence, members should perform all professional responsibilities with the highest sense of integrity. D, objectivity and independence. A member should maintain objectivity and be free of conflicts of interest in discharging professional responsibilities. A member in public practice should be independent in fact and appearance when providing auditing and other attestation services. E, due care. A member should observe the profession's technical and ethical standards, strive continually to improve competence and the quality of services, and discharge professional responsibility to the best of the member's ability. F, scope and nature of services. A member in public practice should observe the principles of the Code of Professional Conduct in determining the scope and nature of services be provided.
Before Shaniqua goes on, can somebody look up the word attestation? So we know what she was talking about when we talk about this thing about due care and objectivity. What do we mean by attestation? A member in public practice as the auditor should be independent when conducting their activities and give the appearance when providing auditing and other attestation services. What does she mean? Attestation?
And would you say attestation like a, oh, go ahead, Brian.
It has, Google has evidence or proof of something.
Yeah, evidence or proof of
Of
something.
something.
Remember, a big part of the auditor's job, per our discussion earlier in the semester, was to verify and to vouch.
Oh,
When
okay.
auditors are verifying and vouching or even asking employees questions, they are looking for evidence. They're looking for proof. They're looking for the existence of information. They simply cannot always take our word for it. They are and have to be able to attest to the fact or prove or show. So when we talk about attestation, that's what we mean. We're not talking off the top of our heads. We have substantive information to back it up. Okay. So if you hear that word again somewhere, it doesn't have to be in an auditing context. Attestation, by that definition we got from Brian, can apply to much of our lives, including your own personal lives. And I believe you can certainly attest to that. See? There you go. It's not as uncommon a word as you think. You may not hear attestation too often, but certainly being able to attest to something is really being able to prove that it actually is. All right.
Number two, the rules of conduct. The second section of the of the AICPA's Code of Professional and Conduct consists of 11 enforceable rules as listed below. Rule 101, independent. A member in public practice should be independent in the performance of professional services as required by standards promulgated by bodies designated by council. In performing an attest engagement, a member should consult the rules of his or her state board of accountancy, his or her state CPA society, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. If the member's report will be filed with the SEC, the U.S. Department of Labor, DOL, if the member's report will be filed with the DOL, the Government Accountability Office, GAO, if law, regulation, agreement, policy, or contract requires the member's report to be filed under GAO regulations, and any organization that issues or enforces standards of independence that would apply to the member's engagement.
You
Such
can,
or-
go ahead, Shaniqua.
Okay, such organizations may have independence requirements or rulings that differ from, example, may be more restrictive than those of the AICPA. Independence shall be considered to be impaired if A, during the period of the professional engagement, a covered member, number one, had or was committed to acquire any direct or material indirect financial interest in the client. Two, was a trustee, a trust or executor or administrator of any estate, if such trust or estate had or was committed to acquire any direct or material indirect financial interest in the client. And one, the covered member individually or with others had the authority to make investment decisions for the trust or estate, or two, the trust or estate owned or was committed to acquire more than 10% of the client's outstanding equity securities or other ownership interests, or three, the value of the trust or estate's holdings in the client exceeded 10% of the total assets of the trust or estate. Three, had a joint, closely held investment that was material to the covered member. Four, except as specifically permitted in interpretation 101-5, had any loan to or from the client, any officer or director of the client, or any individual owning 10% or more of the client's outstanding equity securities or other ownership interests.
In other words, if you're an auditor and you are auditing a firm that you have any financial interest in, whether as a director, whether as a trustee, or any other as an investment person involved in making investment decisions, typically any financial interest in the company, then you should not be auditing or be involved with the audit of that company, because your relationship with that company can and more than likely will impair your good judgment. And so typically, if you have any relationships, especially of a financial nature, with a company that you might be auditing or be asked to audit, you should recuse yourself and not be involved in the audit of that company. That's what impairment means. Impairment means anything that can cause the auditor not to be objective in doing his or her work. Okay. All right, keep going.
B, during the period of professional engagement, a partner or professional employee of the firm, his or her immediate family, or any group of such persons acting together owned more than 5% of a client's outstanding equity securities or other ownership interests. C, during the period covered by the financial statements, during the period of the professional engagement, a firm or partner or professional employee of the firm was simultaneously associated with the client as a one, director, officer, or employee joint in any capacity equivalent to that of a member of management. 2, the promoter, underwriter, or voting trustee, or 3, trustee for any pension or profit sharing trust of client.
Okay, thank you very much, Shaniqua. Great stuff for letting us torch you with all of those ethical requirements, especially under the AICPA. As you can see, if you thought the IFAC was long and APB was long and ICAW, the Americans so far in our discussion, they have the longest versions, something you'd expect from the Brits. But of course, the AICPA is a very well-known accounting and auditing body out of the United States, and they have a lot to say for obvious reasons about audit integrity. All right, Indira, are you ready?
Ready?
Okay, there you are. Fantastic. Okay, Indira.
Rule 102,
Yeah, rule 102.
integrity and objectivity. In performance of any professional service, a member shall maintain objectivity and integrity, shall be free of conflicts of interest, and shall not knowingly misinterpret, misrepresent facts, or subordinate his or her judgment to others. A member shall be considered to have knowingly misrepresented facts in violation of Rule 102 when he or she knowingly, 1, makes or permits or directs another to make materiality, false and misleading entries in an entity's financial statement or records, or 2, fails to correct an entity financial statements or records that are materially false and misleading when he or she has the authority to record and enter, or 3, signs or permits or directs another to sign a document containing materially false and misleading information.
Before Indira goes on, does anybody remember anything we said about materiality, like what it actually is? Like, what is materiality? Anybody remembers? Materiality.
Anything that affects the outcome of the financial statements, like a large amount, well, depending on the size
Yeah,
of the company. But
absolutely. Any amount of money or activity or any kind of activity, usually financial, that is what we call substantial or significant, depending on the size of a company, that can change how we understand the information, is considered to be material. In accounting and auditing, material has to do with something significant that can impact our judgment and the decision we make about those financials. So if somebody in the firm, in the management firm, is supposed to correct a substantial or material error in the financial statements and they do not do this, then that is a major problem. And if the auditor discovers this, the auditor has a responsibility under integrity to go ahead and report it and make it happen and have the change done and report whoever it is in management who didn't make the change. Doesn't matter if they don't like what the auditor did. The auditor is not there to be liked. Remember, the auditor is not there to be anybody's buddy, friend, colleague, nothing. That's where objectivity comes in. When the auditor goes into the firm, even if they know somebody, they have to act like they don't know them. And if they know them too well, they may have to come out of that audit, remember? That's how serious the issue of objectivity is. Because depending on who you know, that could affect or impair, see that word? Impair your judgment, cause you to make the wrong decisions because you know the person or you know the person well. Oh my mind. But this problem does not only exist in auditing. It exists in many, many other areas. Brian, for example, where you work, I'm sure you put two and two together in terms of how important an audit is to your entity, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
I'm sure you've reconsidered your thoughts perhaps on things like integrity, true or false,
True.
objectivity. See, because that place where you work has a history, doesn't it, Brian?
Yeah, still waiting for some people to go to jail, but yeah.
Oh, so you understand my point. All right. You understand it very well. Okay. And yes, still waiting for some to go, but somehow there's a reason why they're not going because certain people are not acting what, Brian? Objectively, right?
Right.
And with integrity. See? Otherwise, they would have been gone a long time ago. They are conflicted because they have affiliations, associations, political connections, personal interactions, and sometimes people don't like to use the word sexual, but it's true. Whether we like it or not, all of these things impair. See that word? Impair our judgment. Just remember as you go forward in your professional lives that these things, don't you dare say, this is only for that auditing class I did. No, this auditing class is to broaden your horizons, whether you're an auditor or not. That's how fortunate you guys are. Okay, Indira, keep going.
Rule 201, General Standards. A member shall comply with the following standards and with any interpretation thereof by bodies designated by council. 1. Professional competence. Undertake only those professional service that the member or the member's firm can reasonably expect to be completed with professional competence. 2. Professional care. Exercise due professional care in the performance of professional services. 3. Planning and supervision. Adequately plan and supervise the performance of professional service. And 4. Sufficient relevant data. Obtain sufficient relevant data to afford reasonable bias for conclusion or recommendations about any professional service performed. A member's agreement to perform professional service implies that the member has the necessary competence to complete those professional service according to the professional standards, applying his or her knowledge and skill with reasonable care and diligence. But the member does not assume responsibility for the infallibility of knowledge or judgment.
Has anybody ever heard the word infallibility before?
No, I've never heard it.
I'm so tempted to just blurt it out, but I'd rather somebody look it up. Infallibility. Infallibility. It's a nice word to know.
I like that.
Another long word. I know. This class is full of long words. That's okay. That's why you're here. Don't worry about it. Learn new stuff.
Want me to go on?
Oh,
Sorry,
Still
my
waiting.
computer was freezing up.
Let me look at it.
To be wrong.
Yeah, to be wrong. So if somebody says
Ollie.
that they're not infallible, and then what do they mean? They could be wrong. Okay, absolutely. They can make a mistake. Nobody's infallible.
Mhm.
So sometimes the next time somebody says you're wrong, they said no problem. Nobody's infallible. And say, where the hell did Brian learn that? With infallible, then they go to Google, see what you're talking about. How about that? All right, keep going, Indira.
Okay. Competence. Oh, hold on. Competence to perform professional service involves both the technical qualifications of the member and the member's staff and the ability to supervise and evaluate the quality of the work performed. Competence relates both to knowledge of the profession standard, techniques, and the technical subject matter involved, and to the capability to exercise sound judgment in applying such knowledge in the performance of professional services. The member may have the knowledge required to complete the service by professional standards before performance. In some cases, however, additional researches or consultation with others may be necessary during the performance of the professional service. This does not ordinarily represent a lack of competence, but rather is a normal part of the performance of professional services. However, if a member is unable to gain sufficient competence through these means, the member should suggest in fairness to the client and the public the engagement of someone competent to perform the needed professional service, either independently or as an associate.
In other words, if you're an auditor and you don't really have the experience to do that particular type of audit, not a problem, nothing wrong with you. You're still an auditor. Get somebody who can rather than mess it up. If you're an individual like any of you guys in this classroom and you cannot do something because you don't have that experience, not a problem. Don't mess it up. Get somebody who can do it. If you need to learn the process, learn it and move on. See that? That's how it should work, whether professionally or otherwise.
Right.
Right. Keep going, Indira.
Okay. Rule 202, compliance with standards. A member will perform auditing, review, completion management, consultant, tax, or other professional service shall comply with standards promulgated by bodies designated by council.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy where it's promulgated. Okay. Uh, well,
Let's look that up.
huh?
I gotta look that up.
Yeah, let's look that up. That's what I'm talking about. I was hoping you'd say that. So let me look that up. Promulgated. Doggone it. No promulgated is gonna tie me up. She said, I'm looking that up.
Promote or make widely known.
Absolutely. So promulgated is just another long drawn out word for to promote. How about that? Okay. So whenever you see it again, somebody decides they're going to try and confuse you that they have promulgated a particular thing. You said, really? What a great promotion or not. See, because I know that now. You're not going
Right.
to beat up and then bloody promulgated.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Okay, Rule 202, accounting principles. Rule 203, sorry, accounting principles. A member shall not, one, express an opinion or state affirmatively that the financial statement or other financial data of any entity are presented to conformity with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, or two, state that he or she is not aware of any material modifications that should be made to such statements or data in order for them to be in conformity with general accepted accounting principles.
Yeah.
If such statement or data contains any departure from an accounting principle promulgated by bodies designated by council to establish such principles that have a material effect on the statement or data taken as a whole.
What does promulgated mean again?
To make known.
To promote.
Yeah, to make known. Now notice
Make known.
she didn't remember promote, but she was smart. She said, I don't have to remember promote, to make known. Exactly the same thing. All right, that's the beauty of it, to make known. So even if you don't know, even if you don't remember the word promote, then you come up with another word or phrase which means the same thing. All right, excellent. Keep going.
If, however, the statement data contains much of the departure and the member can demonstrate that due to usual circumstances, the financial statements or data would otherwise have been misleading. The member can comply with the rule by describing the departure, its approximate effects, if practical, and the reasons why compliance with the principle would result in a misleading statement.
In other words, if the auditor, the member, of course, is the auditor, member meaning member of a professional association. If the auditor discovers that there's a problem with the accounting principle in the financial statements, they have a duty to point this out to the management and shareholders of the firm. And if those principles require changing completely or adjustments, then they will make the recommendation to do so to the company's management. That is part of the auditor's job. All right, keep going, Indira.
Rule 301, confidential client information. A member in public practice shall not disclose any confidential client information without the specific consent of the client. This rule shall be construed, 1, to relieve a member of his or her professional obligation under Rules 202 and 203. 2, to affect in any way the member obligation to comply with a validly issued, validly issued enforceable subpoena or summons, or to prohibit a member compliance with applicable laws and government regulations.
In other words, even though the auditor is required to maintain client confidentiality, if they get an order from the court to produce information, then the confidentiality requirement does not apply. Does everybody get that? The court request overrides the confidentiality requirement. You must send it. In fact, anybody who receives an order from the court must comply. Audit, you, Tingham, or Tingham them. Bishop, plumber, doesn't matter. Any politician, doesn't matter. Anybody who receives an order from the court must comply. Auditor is no exception. They cannot say, I have a confidentiality responsibility under my code of ethics. Not for a court order. Okay, that's what that's all about. Keep going.
That's law.
Say it again.
That's by law.
That's part of the law. Because remember, it's the courts in any country that administers the law.
Right.
So if the law requires it and the court requests it, nobody can refuse it. If you do, you'll be found to be in contempt of court. And if you still refuse to do it, you will be locked up until you comply. How's that? How exciting is that? Auditor, Pope, pauper, plumber, Tingham, or Tingham them, you, me, Brian, the dog. Doesn't matter. We all stuck. All right, keep going.
3, to prohibit review of a member's professional practice under AICPA or state CPA, society or board of accountancy authorization, or to preclude a member from initiating a complaint with or responding to any inquiry made by the professional ethics divisions or trial boards of the institute or a duly constituted
Yes.
constituted investigation or disciplinary body of state, CPA, society, or board accountancy.
In other words, if you're a CPA and you have confidential information from your audit, but your professional body calls you in because a matter has come up that requires investigation, that's similar to a court order. You have to respond. If you don't respond, they will revoke your license. How about that? So these are the conditions under which confidentiality does not apply. And the last two that she mentioned are the most critical of the four of them. Okay? Being summoned by the courts and being summoned by your professional association. All right, keep going.
Members of any of the bodies identified in 4 above and members involved with professional practice reviews identified in 3 above shall not use to their advantage or disclose any member's confidentiality client information that comes to their attention in carrying out those activities.
Keep going.
This prohibition shall not restrict members' exchange of information to connection with the investigation of or disciplinary proceedings described in 4 above or professional practice review described in 3 above. Rule 301 prohibits a member to public practice from disclosing any confidential client information without the specific consent of the client. The rule provides that it shall not be construed
Yes, construed.
to prohibit the review of a member's professional practice under the AICPA or state CPA society authorization. For purpose of Rule 301, a review of a member's professional practice is hereby authorized to include a review in conjunction with the prospective purchase, sale, or merger or of all parts of a member's practice. The member must take appropriate precautions, for example, through a written confidentiality agreement, so that the prospective purchaser does not disclose any information obtained in the course of the review, since such information is deemed to be confidential client information. A member's review and practice in connection with a prospective purchaser or merger shall not use to their advantage nor disclose any member's confidentiality client information that comes to their attention.
Thank you very much, Indira. So now you can see these last couple of paragraphs at the end basically talks about if you have client information, you're not supposed to benefit from it. You're not supposed to call somebody and say, I know something that you'd like to know, and if I give it to you, what would you give me? See, that should not, that is unethical. Okay, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back with information that we have on our clients or on anybody else for that matter, unless of course you're a criminal agency exchanging information on criminals who you need to catch. But typical client information that you're not supposed to benefit using first client information, especially financially, but not only financially, in any form or fashion. Because remember, it doesn't have to be money, it could be a new car. It could be some dancing girls in bikinis, stuff like that, stuff that will get your attention. None of that is acceptable None of that is ethical. Okay. All right. So we are going to stop there. As far as professional ethics are concerned, your questions on the ethics will stop at Rule 301 going up. And so you're responsible for everything up to Rule 301. I think you kind of figured out, I hope, what kind of questions I'm likely to ask on professional ethics. Certainly, it will have to do with the various bodies and the code of ethics that they put forth, whatever threats there might be to those codes of ethics and stuff related there too. So it shouldn't be too hard for you to compile your study notes in that perspective. That may have even been a hint actually that I've given to everybody. All right. So that's where we'll stop. You have one more week before your final exam. Please, I hope you used your holiday weekend wisely to study, to work on your case, and do all that kind of stuff. I hope you didn't have too much fun at the expense of what's coming up next Monday. Remember, you can have fun at any time. So put your head down, do what you have to do, and get past this crazy stuff, and then you're free for a little while until you move on to the next project. All right, any questions, anyone, on anything before we break and you go and get ready for your final?
I have a question.
Yes, Indira.
When we're done with this class, will we be getting certificate?
Yes, you will. As a matter of fact, what happens is, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure it's still a practice at the Institute, every year there is a I wouldn't call it a banquet, but it's an awards ceremony for students who have done different certifications throughout the year. And at that award ceremony, I think it's sometime in October or November. If you want more information, you can just check with the people of BIFS. But around that time, they have this award ceremony, and all students who have done courses there for the year will be publicly awarded at this function. You put on your nice gown and suits and whatever, and you go there and you accept your certificates for your work that you've done for the year. So yes, by all means. Okay. Any other questions? Remember, I'm assuming that you are going to be successful in your examinations and your overall grades. When part 2 comes up, I was about to say beg, steal, or borrow, but you can beg or steal, borrow, but don't steal. Sign up, do the other part, broaden your horizons, because that too has some rather interesting things for you young professionals. All right, so of course, if you think of anything between now and next week, Monday, that you want to raise, send me a text, send me an email. I'll be happy to respond. All right. Until then, good luck, and I'll see you guys next week, Monday.
Good night.
Night, Indira. Take
All
care.
right, good night.
Night, Shaniqua.
All right, good night.
Ryan, take care. Good night, Monique.